I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Today in Hawaii, will protests help save a sacred summit? We look into the controversy over the proposed construction of a $1 billion telescope on Hawaii's Mauna Kea.
And we want to know, what do the Mauna Kea protests mean to you? Share your thoughts with us via Twitter or in our live YouTube chat.
Mauna Kea is more than just the tallest mountain in Hawaii. For some Native Hawaiians, the summit represents the realm of the Earth's creator. But pro-business groups and scientists interested in boosting Hawaii's tech industry want Mauna Kea to also house what would be the largest telescope in the Northern Hemisphere. Known as the 30-meter telescope, or TMT, the project has for years drawn criticism because its proposed location is considered to be one of the most sacred sites for Native Hawaiians. For more than 2 weeks, protesters have been blocking construction vehicles from entering the mountain's access road. And on Tuesday, Hawaii's Governor David Ige announced an extended deadline for telescope construction to start before September 2021.
Protesters on the mountain call themselves the Kiai, or protectors. They say their current struggle is yet another chapter in a long history of racial discrimination and the denial of indigenous rights by the state. So with us to talk about these issues, and Hilo, Hawaii, Kealoha Pashota, president of Mauna Kea Anaina Ho, or People Who Pray for the Mountain. That is a cultural organization that advocates for the protection of Mauna Kea. In Honolulu, David Kawila Copper is staff attorney with the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. Also in Honolulu, Blaze Lovell, a reporter who's been covering the 30-meter telescope story for Honolulu's Civil Beat. We also reached out to officials in the Hawaii government, as well as representatives from the 30-meter telescope project, to join our program. And they said they were unavailable to comment at this time. So welcome to the rest of you. I'd like to bring in our community right away and start with this tweet we got from Christopher Chan, who tries to put this all in perspective for those who might be new to this story. Christopher says, the telescope can be built anywhere in the hemisphere with roughly the same meteorological conditions. Why on sacred land? Colonial hubris is what's holding science back, not Native people who are protecting a cultural place and their ancestors. So strong words right there. Kealoha, for you, what do you see these actions on Mauna Kea? Some would call them protests, others would call them protections, but what do they look like for you?
You know, this is Hawaii's version of joining all these global networks that are actually pushing back on the colonial and I'm going to say corporate structure that's happening now, that's suppressing humanity, basically. This is what I think Mauna Kea is about. It's about raising the standard of aloha and kapu aloha, because that is our cultural way, and unleashing the peace from our cultural way.
Kealoha, you are protesting, protecting
Yes.
Mauna Kea pretty much every day, but you're not there right now. But what are you there doing? Can you explain? Can you set the scene? Can you describe what would normally be around you and what the aim is?
Well, you know, there's global kiai, there's kiai from all the different islands. I'm just a kiai. We've just been doing it for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So we're recognized in that way. We've been doing the legal aspects as well on many levels. But basically, when it comes down to it, we're all just joining together, staying in kapu aloha, raising the standard of aloha for Hawaii and the world. Every people, indigenous peoples, and everyone's indigenous to somewhere, have a gift to give. And I think aloha is one of our gifts. And it's time for us to unleash that in the world.
Blaze, Kealoha has a very beautiful way of describing what she is doing, but as you as a reporter have to do, exactly what do you see? What is going on? Are people lying in front of construction vehicles? How are you telling this story for your audience?
I mean, as a reporter, we really need to, get both sides, but I think with what the protectors are doing there on the mountain, it's a very peaceful demonstration. It's also a very well organized demonstration. That's one of the points I want to hit, is that they've utilized public relations tools companies, governments would use, but I mean, in my opinion, they're controlling the narrative better than possibly the project and the state government has in showing how they're demonstrating peacefully.
So on the other side of this debate are people like Peter. Peter here is on Twitter, who says the 30-meter telescope is essential for scientific advancement and discovery. It's not a resort, condos, a tourist trap, strip mall, or anything such as that. It's a research institution. With science under siege around the world, my home state should stand up to defend it. David, you've been involved in at least 3 lawsuits surrounding Mauna Kea. What is at the heart of them? And this point from Peter, is this one of the issues?
Well, at the heart of all of the legal disputes surrounding Mauna Kea really is this idea that Native Hawaiian culture and rights appear to be foreign in their homeland. And like Peter, views this as a battle of science versus space. But what it really is recognizing that the people from Hawaii, the people who are Hawaii, consider this place to be sacred, and their beliefs are entitled to being held in a high esteem, like science, like everything else. It is not subordinate to this idea that we need to have science and progress. And really it comes down to holding these beliefs, these practices as being important. They're constitutional rights. They should be honored, protected, and not just considered another roadblock to construction.
Kialoa,
Can I add in? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Can I just
Yeah, go
add in
ahead.
there?
Yeah.
Because, this idea that it's Hawaiians against science is really a canard, and it needs to be addressed here. Because really what this movement is about is raising the indigenous voice. We are indigenous also, and we're First Nation people. And our knowledge, our wisdom that's millennia old is a form of science. And what we're doing here is actually reaching out to science to say, science, we need you to do better, because basically destroying the earth, destroying where we're living isn't the way to go about it. Mauna Kea it contains the biodiversity of Hawaii, because Hawaii is an endangered species capital of the world, and every species is either rare, threatened, and or endangered up there, of plants and animals, also protecting our water. So saying yes to development means we're saying no to all of these things. So I really want to break that canard, because it's really not correct.
I want to show you.
Piggyback off Aloha.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
I think media also has a role to play in it. I've seen in the national media, the narrative is that this is Native Hawaiians versus science, and maybe to a local extent, local media also have a part to play in this. But I think journalists around the world, especially in Hawaii, need to do a better job of telling that story. And I think local media has done a better job than national media at breaking that narrative that it isn't just Hawaiians versus science. This is a very complex issue. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a much more nuance in that simple conflict.
Give us a little example of that nuance then, Blaze. Go ahead.
Well, for example, you could say it's Native Hawaiians versus science, but it's not Native Hawaiians versus science. A lot of the Native Hawaiians on the mountain, on Mauna Kea, aren't opposed to science. A lot aren't opposed to TMT even. Some of them say that it could be moved to Spain and the Canary Islands. A lot of them are scientists themselves. There's also cultural issues at play, issues of heritage. This, for a lot of the protectors on Mauna Kea, this is just the latest event in a long line of unfortunate events that started with the overthrow of the Hawaiian government, the way the United States came in. It's all these things collating into what TMT has become a symbol for, which is, to many, the oppression of indigenous people.
Blaze, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, and Kialoa also mentioned it, because we got a comment from someone via video who talks about having to choose, being forced to choose because of the way this narrative has come out in media. This is Aurora, a PhD student in Honolulu, and here's her take on it.
I am not involved in direct action on Mauna Kea, but I've been watching, concerned, and have been, through writing, challenging the dehumanizing narrative that resistance to TMT construction on Mauna Kea reflects Hawaiians that are anti-science, backward, obstructionist, which is how it's been portrayed until recently in local media. I have deep concerns over this framing because it's affected not only me and my peers, but also students I've worked with, and forced people to feel as if they have to take sides.
So when it comes to taking sides, Kiloa, you must understand this struggle because you yourself were a telescope systems specialist. You're there consulting. Talk to us about that dichotomy, having to be forced to take sides.
I understand this, and I really appreciate Aurora's mana'o, her philosophy here, and for her to express that struggle. The thing is like I said, it's a canard. This idea that I mean, basically the racism in it is for them when they called us this in court, they called us backward-looking extremists. Now, those are hotbed words. And the irony is that astronomy itself is based on looking back in time, right? Looking back towards the origin of the universe. When you look back and actually astronomy has the issue to prove that it has modern relevancy, because some of the things we're looking out there are, say, 200 million years light years away. That means it happened to whatever event we're looking at now. The light took 200 million light years to get to us. So that's kind of the dichotomy we're actually looking at. But she's correct in assessing that we're having to defend not only our cultural rights, which should be protected not only by the United States Constitution, even though we challenge U.S. occupation here, but U.S. Constitutional provisions as well as state provisions that Kawila was speaking about.
Okay.
These are primacy, supreme rights that should be honored.
David.
If I can jump in as well.
Go ahead.
What gets lost in this narrative is this is an incredibly large, immense structure. It is going to be the tallest on the island and built in a place which both legally and culturally has traditionally been held to be the most important and to have the least amount of development or disturbance. So, people are often pit this, okay, this is science versus culture. I mean, this is about protecting a place that is incredibly sacred. It is, even under the laws, a place that should have very little disturbance, yet we're seeing just a massive structure that can have incredible effects on the environment and the landscape there. And that often gets swept under the rug when we're talking about, okay, this is about science versus Native Hawaiians. That's not what this is about at all.
David, this idea of the land being incredibly sacred, I don't think we can underline this enough, because this is the key to why would you build not just one giant telescope, but multiple telescopes that are already there. So there's obviously a different way of thinking from Native Hawaiians and the way that the government are thinking or the University of Hawaii are thinking. How can you work out that clash, that cultural clash, that understanding as to what this mountain represents and whether there should be even a single telescope there, let alone another one that is being proposed to be built there?
Right, I think it does go back to Native Hawaiian rights and culture being viewed as foreign. I think if this was a normal Western burial site or a church, that I think a lot of people would be able to wrap their minds around it and say, okay, we understand. But it seems like almost a across-the-board reluctance to accept what I would say a large amount of Native Hawaiian people believe to be true and believe to be sacred and important, and they're just being looked at as, well, we don't believe you. And that seems to be what underlines a lot of the legal cases here, where we have to have lawsuits to just say, hey, Native Hawaiians have right to be involved in court process and to be involved in the development and permitting of projects. And there's a history of cases like that had to have been brought because Native Hawaiians are not given a voice when it comes to important decisions that affect Hawaii.
Blaise, I want to share something with you. This comes from the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commission. I'm going to put up their response to us. This was the statement they sent. We told them we were doing this show. This is the statement they sent. It's huge. But they obviously were very concerned about what was happening in Hawaii. This sentence jumped out at me. Violating the rights of Native Hawaiians in the name of science cannot be justified in any way. They go even further. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples regards these actions, i.e. the building or the attempted building of TMT on Mauna Kea, as discriminatory and racist. That's a UN rapporteur. But how do Hawaiians and people who live in Hawaii, how are they seeing it? Are they seeing this as racism?
I think Native Hawaiians here, that's one of the things that they're looking at is it could be, as I said, another event in a string of cultural oppression. But I think project leaders in the state, the way they're justifying it is with the possible economic impact that the telescope could bring. Everyone touts that number, $1.4 billion is the total construction amount for the telescope. But with any construction project, you never know what kind of actual economic impact it could have, if it will actually create local jobs and how much dollars it will actually bring into the local economy. That's things reporters here are all trying to figure out. And that's something that we're going to have to wait and see on how it actually pans out.
Why isn't that information readily available? Because this is land that's used by the University of Hawaii. It's in the public domain. Am I right in saying that? So why can't you just find that information out?
Can I speak to that for a moment?
Right.
I'm sorry. I just want to correct something. It's actually held in trust by the state for the benefit of Native Hawaiians and the general public. It's it's crowned and what they call ceded lands. And the one thing I wanted to mention about the United Nations aspect is that they don't have the clear and informed consent of the indigenous people of Hawaii. And the colonial activity that they're bringing forward is something that is the United Nations and the world community is trying to eliminate. That's why it's not lawful to maintain that colonial stance. And what we're facing now is a colonial corporate structure that is attacking Mother Earth and trying to dominate that. And we're pushing back, along with the many global movements around the world.
I wanted to, picking up on what you're saying there, I wanted to share this comment from a neighborhood organizer in Hawaii who talks about what this means and why it's so important. Have a listen to Ikaika.
We have a core philosophy called Aloha Aina, and it translates as love of land or love of country. And it's what kept us going through the overthrow in 1893. It helped us stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe. And on the Mauna, at Mauna Kea, it's helped us to build a new community around with free healthcare, free education, free childcare, an abundance of food. And I think it's because people all throughout our community and internationally recognize that Aloha Aina is the alternative. It's the alternative to the capitalism and the forces which are destroying our earth. We need to protect all of these places which we believe are sacred. And I really believe that applies to everywhere.
So David, you heard his viewpoint on why this is sacred, but I want to show you this. This from someone watching live on YouTube, Jason, who says the TMT has been settled in court. Now the police are not doing their job. Protesting is great and fine, but they are defying the law. They meaning the protesters or protectors. David, where are we right now? Is this comment accurate?
In a sense, but I think it also shows a failure to understand what's really going on. It's one thing to say that a project has a permit and that the state issued that permit for development, but is that really what should happen? Is it the will of the people? And it very clearly is not. Is it the best way to treat and manage these very important and sacred trust lands, which Kealoha is correct, by law, they should be preserved and protected for the benefit of Native Hawaiians and the public. And so, just because one body in the government decided to allow for this desecration of state lands does not mean that Native Hawaiians and people who feel passionately otherwise should just be relegated to standing on the side of the road, waving signs, and while this sacred place gets desecrated. That is not the answer, just because a government agency gave a rubber stamp to this project.
Guess I want to show, if I may, I want to show our audience something that I'm sure you've seen, but they may not have seen. This is an editorial by some of the top executives at TMT, and they wrote this editorial on July the 28th. It was written by the executive director, the observatory scientist, and also the TMT VP for external relations. So basically, three very important people. Something really jumped out at me. So it says right there at the bottom, whether or not TMT is built in Hawaii will not bring closure to it. That to me sounds like Kealoha. We are not going anywhere. We don't care what you protest. We are sticking around. What are you going to do next?
Well, let me just point this out. TMT, one of our cases is the failure for TMT to put up the bond, the financial bond, which is required from the 1977 Mauna Kea
Kealoha,
plan.
I'm going to ask you to keep this simple for us who are just following this as an international audience. So just tell us how that relates.
Thank you.
What are you going to do next?
Well, what we're going to do is maintain our position of nonviolence, kapu aloha, and we are going to continue to stand to protect our sacred mountain. TMT really is lacking a lot of the requirements that they need to actually come through. They don't have enough money to construct at this time.
Right.
That's a huge issue. They also don't have the extended lease. Technically, if they were allowed to build when they got done, after 10 years, they would only have 7 years on their lease for the land. So they're a risk. And we're challenging that. And there's a lot of challenges. Kauila has challenges as well. And yeah, we're going to continue to stand, and we're going to continue to move aloha.
And I'd like to add to this. I agree with what Kealoha is saying, and to address TMT's statement directly, which I hear as, "Hey, we are just one telescope. This, we're just one issue." Well, that's how things progress in history. It was one sacred site, then 2, then 10. It was the bombing of Koho'olawe, bombing of various areas throughout Hawaii by the military. There are many sacred sites that have been bulldozed and built upon. There are Native Hawaiian burial sites that have been dug up and desecrated. And we have this telescope. And you can take one instance and say, okay, this is just happening in one place at one time. But it's the collective effect and really the dehumanizing effect that all of these actions have on the Native Hawaiian people. So I think it is unfair of TMT to say, hey, we understand what you're going through, but we're not it. They are a part of this. And I think right now they are the flagship of it. And it represents the struggle that indigenous people have to go through throughout history and at all times.
Right. And Blaze, just time for one more comment. I want to bring this in from Kirk on Twitter, who says, Mauna Kea protesters got this one wrong. There is plenty of room for compromise, i.e. build TMT, which is needed, not just for exploration, but safety from space objects, and tear down one of the other two. Facilitate that. Blaze, from the people you've been talking to, will that be enough? Blaze?
Sorry, I lost connection at the end of that.
That's okay.
There,
in just about 30 seconds now, with the people you've been talking to, will tearing down some of the other telescopes be enough to stop this action?
Oh, the protectors there at Mauna Kea made it very clear that they don't intend to move and they will not give way. And even if you tear down a couple more telescopes, TMT, if the project wants it up there, they're going to try to get it up there, and you'll still have a lot more telescopes on Mauna Kea. It wouldn't really change the situation.
Blaze, thank you so much. David, thank you. Kealoha, thank you so much as well, explaining why there have been protests going on for so long about Mauna Kea and a giant telescope that is trying to be built there, but not quite yet. That's all the time we have. Malik and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.